Hi everybody, this is Jim. Welcome to this Blitz test postmortem, a postmortem of my Blitz game number 290. I was white here, kicked off with d4, knight f6, c4, and e6. And I chose to play, instead of my usual knight c3, allowing the Nimzo Indian, or even knight f3, actually the top choice here these days, knight f3, avoiding the Nimzo Indian. I decided to play g3, which is the Catalan. And now the normal way for the Catalan to proceed would be with d5, and then later black has a choice of taking on c4 or supporting the center, and if he takes it's the open Catalan, and if he supports it it's the closed Catalan. But he plays, well, it looks like bishop b4 check here as a move, trying to disrupt my development and force a bishop here onto the d2 square. But he plays c5, which is a way of transposing into a Benoni. So I can accept the Benoni structure with d5, which I did, or I can decline it by playing knight f3. But I don't mind playing against a Benoni type structure, although this setup I have here is not considered the most aggressive setup against a Benoni, this fianchetto. It looks like knight c3 here is the most common move, but surely there's nothing too wrong with bishop g2. Well, okay, the engine didn't like it either. Interesting. So e4 or knight c3. E4 is interesting. That looks like it's losing a pawn, but I guess not, because if he takes it, then queen a4 check. It's that trick. Forking the king and the knight. So you could just play e4 right here, or knight c3 here, preparing e4. Anyway, I just went with the fianchetto. Bishop g2. So that's still an edge for white, so I haven't done anything horrible. Now, to stay within the Benoni lines, just g6 and bishop g7, and then we'd have a modern Benoni where I've played a fianchetto setup against the Benoni, which is playable for white and probably leads to the usual kind of slight opening advantage. But instead, my opponent went with bishop e7. A bit of an unusual sideline here. So this opening got classified as a Catalan after all. So it started as a Catalan, headed towards Benoni territory, and then ended up as a Catalan after all, because he didn't play the Benoni lines there. Okay, so knight c3 is sort of the logical move, just supporting the center. So pawn is not really under attack, and I could have played e4 right away once again. But anyway, I'm preparing e4 here. My opponent castled. I play e4, and now we're out of the opening book. But the game proceeds along fairly normal lines for a while. Knight bd7, just developing his pieces. You see later in the game he pushes this pawn, and that opens up the square on c5 for his knight, and then he also gets into d3, which is kind of interesting. I'll show that when it happens. Knight f3. a6, preparing for queenside expansion. This is the usual Benoni type of strategy, although it's more appropriate when you've got a bishop on this diagonal to take advantage of the weaknesses created by the advancing pawns here. So anyway, but I want to slow down the queenside advance. I play a4, and then he plays b6. So he's got, for the moment, a stable structure over here, but he's not advancing. So I castle, goes bishop b7, and rook e1. So I've got a decent position out of the opening. Only piece I really need to figure out what to do with is this bishop. Queen c7 and knight to h4. So this maybe is a mistake. I was wondering, should I be pushing this pawn to f4, or should I be putting the bishop on f4? The engine likes bishop to f1. Now that's a funny move, retreating the bishop. Maybe it's got some good use along this diagonal. Or b3. b3 is probably a good idea, slowing down his idea of pushing on to c4. Or knight h4. Look, knight h4 showed up. Anyway, I mean, the idea of knight h4 is this looks like a good square for the knight, and it also allows me to play f4 later. Okay, my opponent goes knight e5, occupying this very good square for his knight. And now I play knight f5. It's like the second choice here. f4, I wasn't quite sure about f4. It's kind of a loosening move a little bit. It opens up a lot of space here, but looks like it's playable there. But this is a decent way to play too. and then my opponent pushes on with c4, which I didn't understand at first, because he hasn't got a knight that can jump into the c5 square, which is the usual reason for playing c4. But then I realized, oh, he's got knight d3 here. And it's a little bit tricky to play this. Once again, bishop f1 here is recommended, just directly challenging that idea. So I played a move that was probably just a mistake, bishop d2. Yeah, the evaluation jumps a little bit. But even though this wins a pawn for black, it's funny that white still keeps an advantage here. So I allow his knight in. I have to move my rook. And then he can grab a pawn, which he should. But even though I'm a pawn down, the engine still favors white here. And it thinks I should proceed with knight takes bishop, getting rid of this defender of his d6 pawn. Or queen e2. Well, I played queen c2, so not too bad. Still keeping some advantage. He goes back to d3, and then I play my bishop to f1 to try and chase this knight away or win it. The engine recommends knight e2, and this is an interesting line. I didn't think of this at all. Knight e2 actually directly threatens to take the knight because of the pin. His queen is undefended on c7, so I'm really threatening just to take the knight there. He needs to defend his queen with rook f c8 or play bishop to d8. Yeah, another way of defending the queen, probably with the rook. Makes more sense. And then bishop to h3 to make the rook uncomfortable there. And it looks like I have enough play, even though I'm still a pawn down. Anyway, I decided to go directly after the knight, and now the engine switches to favoring black, and black gets a lot of activity here. He jumps in with knight g4, which is a good move. I could just give up the exchange. If we back up a second, the engine is saying bishop takes d3, knight takes e3 is an okay way to play as well. But I wasn't ready to do that. I wasn't sure it was entirely necessary. So I play my rook to f3 here, defending the pawn on f2, which was under attack from the two knights. And now he goes bishop f6. Knight g to e5 might have been even more interesting, hitting my rook again. But he played bishop f6, which is also a good move. And now I take his knight. And now he has to take back right away. He tries to throw in an intermediate move, and it just doesn't work. You can see the only move here is c takes d3. So before you play these intermediate moves, you really need to check them out and make sure I have no choice but to recapture the way you expect. But even bishop takes c3 is good in this situation, it looks like. But queen takes d3 is clearly superior, because now I am taking advantage of this pin on the pawn, and so I've just picked up a piece. So that's the lesson of this game. Black, up until this point, bishop f6, bishop takes d3. Yeah, black with c takes d3 has still got an edge. Say he takes here. And I was thinking of taking with the queen. The engine likes rook takes. And what's the status? 1 on 2. I got my pawn back, but my pieces are just kind of weirdly placed, I think. And black has a lot of activity. He plays knight e5. And the rook goes to e3. He's kind of chasing me around. And then the bishop to g5. No, just g6, harassing my knight. Yeah, it looks like black is doing well in this position. Okay, so, but he took my knight instead of taking my bishop. And then I take back with the queen, creating a pin and preventing him from taking my bishop, and now I'm just a piece up. So he plays on here, but I don't think the outcome was ever in doubt after this. Let's see if there's any interesting tricks after this point. He's trying to stay active and go after my weak spots. But my pieces are coordinated enough to be able to defend. It just takes a while for me to reorganize everything and really push forward for the final breakthrough, which happens somewhere around here. Well, getting the queens off is a big help, obviously, because now there's not so many counter threats. I can defend this with one rook and have the other rook free. So this trade helps me. And then this was a nice move, actually. When you get to the end game, one important step is to try and restrict what your opponent can do. If he has an active rook and can come around and gobble up your pawns, that can cause a lot of trouble and give counter chances to your opponent. So just this knight e3 move was a nice move to prevent his rook from getting active. And now my rook can come in, and he resigned at this point. I'm attacking these pawns, and he can only defend one of them, and then I'll have a passed pawn that I can queen pretty simply. So interesting game, I thought. Is doing pretty well till he made that one mistake in calculation, the kind of thing you got to always watch out for. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.